Right, good morning everyone and welcome to today's ConstructionCast. I am today Annie Clift, as you can see on the screen. If you can see my name, I'm down as Annie. I'm going to introduce to you the four speakers that we've got with us today, and then we'll go into a conversation. We're going to be looking today at the future of real estate design and development. So just bear with me because my laptop's gone a little bit crazy. Right, so we've got with us today three speakers. We've got Simon Ralphs, who is a real estate partner at the leading law firm Clarkslegal. His particular specialism is restaurants and hospitality. I'm hoping we're going to look at a few different sectors this morning. So Simon's particular specialism is going to be quite useful. And as we probably all know, that restaurants and hospitality have been particularly hard hit this year. So Simon's been described, and I do like lawyers because they have lots of quotations about what people think about them and what people say about them. So Simon's been described as easy to deal with, knowledgeable, very quick and extremely personable. He's noted for being very knowledgeable in the field of restaurant leases, and he's strong for franchising arrangements in the food and restaurant sector. So very grateful to Simon for being with us this morning. We've got Martin Long, who has over 30 years experience as a project manager. He's worked in the past for Arup, Stanhope, Bureau 4, set up his own firm, Ashfold Management Services, in 2013. He helps clients to deliver projects. Most of his work is around London and the South East. He's worked on various projects such as the Paternoster Square project in the City of London. So Martin's project management experience is going to be very helpful to us this morning. And then finally, Cristina Lanz Azcarate, who is the founder and principal, I hope I've pronounced your surname correctly, apologies if not. She's the founder and principal of Atelier EURA. She's a chartered architect and chair of the London group of the National Association of Women in Construction. So we're looking forward to an interesting discussion this morning, looking at the future of real estate development, construction, and all of those lovely things. So we've had quite an interesting week. We had the announcement at the weekend, or almost announcement, despite President Trump's refusal to accept it, that we were having a new president-elect in America. Who knows where that will take us, but certainly who knows where it will take the world in terms of the environment, sustainability, all the things that tend to affect our sector. And of course, yesterday we had the announcement that there's a possibility that there might be maybe a vaccine for COVID-19, provided that the mink in Denmark don't get too active and travel around the world with a new version of COVID-19. So who knows what will happen on that front, but fingers crossed, you never know, we might be able to do some of these sort of things face to face at some point in the future. So we're going to start with a little look at the circular economy, and certainly following on from the announcement, certainly with the election of President-elect Biden and his announcement that he's going to bring America back into the Paris Climate Accord. What do we think might be game changers, Martin? If we can come to you first of all, clear targets for real estate. Where do we think things might go in terms of climate change and the circular economy and all of those sorts of things?
Thank you, Stuart. Well, I think it's very timely that President-elect Biden has mentioned one of the first things he's going to do on January the 20th next year, hopefully, is take the US back into the Paris Agreement. I think a lot of Americans, I mean, we have to be fair that almost half of America has voted for Trump, despite the fact that it looks like Biden's going to win. There has been a feeling, I think, coming from the States that zero carbon, carbon reduction, planning buildings to reflect those kind of requirements has kind of gone off the agenda. So I think it will be very interesting to see what corporate America decides to do with that news. I think there's a lot of people based in California, based in New York, who are principally Democrat voters. Certainly I've got friends, having lived in the States for 3 years, certainly I've got a lot of friends in California who are very keen and see this as a major change in direction for engineering design, particularly in the States. And I think the social values that represents will mean that a lot more, some corporate America will be more interested in the ideas of reducing carbon. I think the States has been going that way with LEED, and with other initiatives that are meaning that they're looking more seriously at the introduction of electric cars and driverless cars and Uber and all of that kind of technology is driving us in that direction. I think in my own world, one of the things that I have been reading about and getting more interested in has been the circular economy. That's been my sort of lockdown reading topics. I think there are a lot of initiatives underway. I think there are lots of good work going on by various organisations. I guess LETI is one that I've come across, being a services engineer by background. That's the London Energy Transformation Initiative that's been going for some time, but a number of organisations are buying into that, and that is, I think, going to become more prevalent, particularly in London, obviously, but the effect of that around the UK as we go forward.
Yeah, thanks, Martin. I think, Cristina, we chatted yesterday about some of your experiences and your views on lessons we might learn from other parts of the world and other places. And just before we come to you're on mute at the moment, so just make sure that you unmute yourself before we start talking. I was on a webinar the other day where every single person was on mute every time they spoke, and they kept having to tell each other that they were on mute. So, but what lessons do you think we might learn from other places and other parts of the world on reducing waste, the way that buildings are reused and recycled and minimized in terms of the carbon footprint, etc.?
Well, I think this is both based on my experience and what I have seen through my projects and other countries. But basically, I think many people have been looking at modern methods of construction as a way to, for example, minimize waste. And I think the reason why they could be making a big difference is because they require quite a lot more planning ahead, and therefore you consider more carefully the materials you are going to be using, and also you consider it as a system that you are going to be implementing. One of the key challenges, I think, in comparison to other countries where this is kind of part of the everyday, one of the key challenges that the UK has, in particular the residential sector, is that this kind of system requires basically upfront costing, and also a lot of lead time in terms of the preparation side of things, the design side of things. So this is why, for example, some of the sectors in the UK are implementing them more easily than others. And I think, for example, this is something that other countries have already accepted as part of their strategies, and they are finding much more easy to adapt and to bring into even the housing sector. Northern European countries, also Germany, and of course countries such as Japan, they have the mentality of almost like a manufacturing process, like if you think about it, like car setup, where you may have more limited personalization opportunities, but at the same time you have a clearer picture of first of all the cost of what you are going to be purchasing, the timing, how long it's going to take to be built, and also the kind of use of materials. And why this is important in the context of circular economy is because it also allows you to create the kind of waste as a design flow approach, and also to kind of involve the manufacturers in the process of maintenance, repair, etc., which is quite vital to avoid having to recycle, which is essentially what the circular economy is looking into. So, for example, there is a really good book I would recommend called Donut Economics, and it talks about the kind of case studies and examples of where this could be applied. So if you think, for example, about electrical fittings in the setup of a circular economy, it would allow you for the manufacturer to be the person owning the fittings and would be able to provide the replacements, or even give you the little component that would need to be replaced in order for the system to continue to work. So if you think about modern methods of construction in Japan, if you want to replace your bathroom, you know that the bathroom has a certain module, and you go to the bathroom shop and you have kits that they literally could be inserted in your house to replace the kit that is currently in place. And this facilitates a lot the process and minimizes the waste quite a bit, but it obviously requires a mental shift. And one concept that I came across during our recent conference for NAWIC was the idea of a circular economy manager. So somebody who is part of the design process and helps the team understand the life cycle of everything that we put in the design, so that everybody considers from every point of view. A little bit, if you think about CDM, so it would be another person coming in another role, and they would be the ones reminding people, okay, this has to be replaced, how is it going to be repaired, etc. And I think this could be very valuable in the construction process.
Brilliant. Yeah, I think it's fascinating hearing you talking about different countries, whether it's Japan, Europe, because your experiences are all around the world. And I think, you know, we have had that thing over the last few years where we have had a little shift towards being a little bit more insular and a little bit more territorial. And it's, you know, if we can learn lessons, surely we ought to be learning lessons, particularly when it comes to things like modern methods of construction. That surely makes sense, that, you know, those kind of modular ways of constructing things and having kits, as you say, for parts and components, and making sure that things are easy to replace and reuse. So we'll move on. Have a look at the changing high street and hospitality and all of those sorts of things. So this year's obviously been a difficult year for the high street and hospitality. And Simon, you're at the heart of that as somebody who deals with it every day in, day out. So what sort of changes have you seen with your clients and the world of restaurants and hospitality, and how's the sector reacted and coped with what the world has thrown at them this year?
Thanks. Yeah, it's been interesting actually. We've had quite a few changes and some positive actually, which is great. So I'll start looking at events and event space and leisure. They've obviously struggled because they need people in large numbers in their spaces. Some of them have tried to adapt to online, which obviously is difficult, as we've all experienced through our online meetings. The other thing is obviously they're not getting the bar money that most of these venues rely on. So that's been difficult. I've got one client who runs event spaces for photo shoots and exhibitions and things like that, and their work has just fallen off the cliff. Meaning that they've got basically no income, and different experiences with landlords as well. Some of their landlords have understood that and met them halfway or even given them rent freezes, but other landlords have just insisted that they carry on paying their rent. So it's difficult. It's been really difficult for that space in particular. And then moving on to restaurants, a bit more positive. They've quickly realized it's adapt or die, and a lot of them have really benefited from the furlough scheme, obviously, because that saved them great amounts of their expense. They've also, the ones that have adapted quickly to a good delivery model, and also DIY kits and other ways of sort of getting some income in, have done really well and have got through quite well. Obviously not getting the same amount of income they used to, but it's helped them massively. I even had one client who managed to open in May, which is pretty unheard of in the restaurant sector, but they'd done a decent deal with the landlord to get some upfront rent free, and they'd also set up the restaurant very much as a delivery concept initially that they could then convert into a proper restaurant later. So there's positive things out there that have happened, which is great. And then also chefs and restaurateurs have found the extra time has helped them look at their business plans to tighten those up, and also look at menus and try and come up with new ideas on that front. So there's some positivity on that side of things. Also, we've touched on it already, but there's obviously been a greater focus on waste and food poverty, with Marcus Rashford obviously stepping in to do his bit. And I think that's been a really positive sign from the restaurant community. Also, there's more space available, unfortunately, with some restaurants having to close their doors, which opens up the spaces for different new exciting concepts, which hopefully will get in there on cheaper rents, and eventually when everything's open again, they'll we hope thrive. The main negative, I'd say, is probably that investors obviously they're traditionally are wary of restaurants anyway, and obviously they're even more wary now at the moment. So there's not much money around for new concepts to get up and running. But again, with people focusing more on their business plans and tightening things on the finances, hopefully we'll get through that.
Something that's quite interesting for me is, I think people often see the solicitors as the bad guys, no matter what situation, what scenario you're in. It's like, oh, do we need a solicitor? They're going to cost us a fortune, and and I'm going to throw this. This isn't a question we do obviously for these things prepare questions, but I thought I'll throw this in, and hopefully it won't catch you too on the back foot. But what kind of benefits do you bring to the party in those sorts of situations? So you mentioned things like rent-free and periods and things like that. Is that something that you help clients negotiate?
Yeah, I mean, what we've found is that obviously clients are worried about spending money on legal fees. So there's a lot of work that we've realised that we've had to do for free, and we've had to help these guys out with the view that in future, they'll succeed and we'll be able to help them. That's how the restaurant sector seems to work. It's quite a small community and everyone helps everybody. So there's been some of that, but yeah, on the business side of things, I quite often get clients ringing up saying, the landlord's offered me this, what do you think? And so it's giving that business advice as well as the legal advice.
Yeah, exactly. Great stuff. So Cristina, we spoke yesterday about outdoor culture and cafe culture. Do you think that's going to be the saviour of the high street? Do you think that's the way that things are going to go in future? Are we going to be seeing more outdoor and cafe culture even in the depths of January and February? And on food deliveries and things like that, where do you see things going as a...
Well, one of the first thing I want to say is that actually Simon has just highlighted several things. I mean, as a foreigner, I found quite remarkable that the high street in the UK has been driven by large corporations, and that essentially the high street in the past, I mean, I've been here 22 years. So in the past 20 years, it's been a little bit, well, maybe up to 5 years ago, 10 years ago, maybe, it was only like a open, outdoor shopping center. And I think it was relying, because of the high rents, it was having to rely on large corporate occupiers to come. Then a few years ago, suddenly the agents decided that actually maybe we should introduce some, we call it, architects call it activity, but they called it coffee culture. And now coffee culture is not a Starbucks, because coffee culture is kind of based on joie de vivre and enjoyment of life, enjoying the quality of life, stopping to have a coffee, not grabbing a coffee on the go. My God, how horrifying is this? It's kind of like pull up a chair, sit and talk to your neighbors. So one thing that I think is really good from COVID is that it has made people realize what are the amenities available to them, accessible to them within walking distance around the house, because we are not allowed to kind of go to places. Suddenly we are forced to consider this. And actually, now there is even a name for it. So the French, in Paris, there is a professor in the Sorbonne whose name is Carlos Moreno, and he has created this concept of the 15-minute city, which is essentially the idea that you should find everything you need for your everyday within 15 minutes around your house. This means, reduction of pollution. It means support of your local businesses. It means actually having to rethink what is going to be occupying your high street, and that it has to be there to provide a service. Now, again, through COVID, we have become used to the idea of ordering online. So it's no longer necessary maybe to go to a shop and buy a t-shirt. You can actually find it online and then focus on other things that you actually need to go to the high street for. And I think this idea of community is also emphasized in the restaurant businesses. For example, I think we work with kind of small businesses in the street food kind of bracket, and I think they are very interesting. Like Simon was saying, it's a very small community. Everybody knows each other, and everybody is very supportive of each other, and we work within that space. And I think this idea of community, your customers supporting your business through COVID and through anything is really important. So I think this is really important. And also I just wanted to throw there a couple of other alternatives I have seen elsewhere. So for example, concept stores, I have seen them in New York, in Japan, and in Spain. So places where actually you combine a series of small businesses that they are complementing of each other, but they are not competing. They are just kind of adding to the experience within one space. So this reduces the risk of landlords because you have multiple users, and also is really cool from the point of view of the experience because you don't feel you are going to a corporate environment. And also another opportunity could be temporary framework. So if you think about the idea of markets, the old market where you would go and buy your vegetables and everything, so bring this idea again to and embed it in the high street. So use the idea of pop-ups and kind of using the public realm to bring people and actually get them to enjoy the outdoor living, even in winter. And I'm not going to advocate for outdoor stoves, which are going to be banned from next year in Paris, particularly. But, kind of make the most of what we have. It's been brilliant weather since March. And I think we have been taking it for granted. So,
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. That community concept is something that we experienced. We never used to experience. And Martin knows that where Annie and I used to work is down in the city of London, and there's very limited scope for community. Although they do now use Paternoster Square quite a lot. But where we are now at Waterloo, we're part of the business improvement district, and our actual office is part of the business improvement district. But we do have a definite strong sense of community down on Lower Marsh, and that sort of area is really nice. And I think if you can cultivate that, and as you say, businesses and people can support each other through these sort of times. We're very conscious of the fact that we need to keep our little street market alive and all the street food stalls and that sort of thing. So I'm going to move on now and do a little bit of crystal ball gazing, if we can. Hopefully not too much navel gazing, but we'll have a look at the future. So, Martin, something we spoke about was looking at the impact of, obviously, the Grenfell disaster and fire safety and all of that sort of thing. And do you think there'll be wide-reaching effects on the way that buildings, and particularly housing, but buildings generally, are conceived, designed and managed in future?
Yeah, I'd be the first to admit that I don't read all the Grenfell hearing sort of outtakes and what the legislation is likely to be, but I read enough of it to know that legislation will be changing. I think there will be far-reaching effects. I'm already seeing in day-to-day projects clearly the role of the fire strategy and the improved inspector has become much more. We listen to those people, we follow what those people's guidance is. Clients are not going to suggest alternatives unless they know that the fire strategy isn't invalidated. So I think all of those things, albeit that Grenfell was probably a once in a lifetime type experience, I think our track record on fire generally is quite good, but there's room for improvement. And so I think we will see that having a major impact. I think, Cristina, you were saying when we spoke about this yesterday that there's a possibility, or there will be more training for architects. I'm sure there will be expectations that clients discharge their responsibilities in the same way they do with CDM at the moment. That will become something that they have to do from a fire and a design responsibility. I think on the upside, that's not the upside. I suppose that's inevitable. I think some of the things that will come together, and it won't be this year, it could be a 5-year horizon, will be building passports. So building the equipment, the technology, the items that are in our buildings, whether it's the steelwork, whether it's the concrete, whether it's the cladding, they will have digital passports in some shape or form, whether it's QR codes or something more sophisticated, so that, taking back to the first point about the circular economy and low carbon or zero carbon, you'll actually know what you're dealing with when you come to take a building apart in the future. And that's a long way ahead. That's looking at what you do with the buildings we're putting up now in 30 years' time. But I think there is a recognition that will become more prevalent. I think the golden thread is one of the things that Grenfell has identified, that how projects are procured, which I guess is something I care about. There's going to have to be more consistency. There's this diminished responsibility as you pass it down the line and people don't know what the brief was or don't know what the expectations was. That's a culture that will have to go. And again, Cristina mentioned the car industry and some of the off-site kind of initiatives. I think that's been a slow initiative. It's been around for a long time now, and the UK hasn't embraced it as much as I thought it might. But I think COVID might make us realise that manufacturing off-site is just better and lower risk and doesn't involve as many people in close proximity to each other. And manufacturing in controlled environment may be its moment, but I think I'm a big fan of off-site, but I also recognise that there are barriers to off-site gaining credibility in the commercial world.
I think, yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Annie and I do a lot of work in the kind of the construction technology and BIM sector and all of those sorts of places, and it does still seem to be quite a niche thing. And after so many years, you'd think we would have embraced it a little bit more than we have done. And I think that's something that it sounds like other places, from what Cristina was saying earlier, are embracing it a lot more than perhaps we are. So just moving quickly on, because I know time is short. Simon, on the use of buildings and certainly the commercial space and office space and retail and all of those sorts of things, what do you think the future of our streets and high streets might look like? What's going to happen to? Have you got any thoughts on how offices and retail might look in future?
Crystal ball stuff, isn't it? But I think the government obviously are trying to make things a bit easier to change between uses, which obviously they're changed the use classes provision back in September. So obviously there's a bit more fluidity between changing from shops to cafes to offices to research and so on. So I think that's obviously the view, is that there needs to be more fluidity, less stuff getting delayed through the planning process, so that people can switch over and start making money if they can on their properties. And so I think looking to the future, that's probably, it should drive some change, I would have thought. The key things I'm seeing at the moment are, and this was happening before COVID, office space becoming more resi focused or changing to resi developments with less people potentially commuting and going into the city centres, that it may be that they become more residential hubs, which fits back into the community aspect that we were talking about earlier. So it could be a massive change to city centres, that one. And then on the retail side, again, before lockdown and COVID, the retail sector was struggling, and we were seeing some changes from retail to leisure. So examples being BHS on Oxford Street becoming a golf swingers thing. And query on that one is whether people are going to be coming into town more to go to those leisure activities. Perhaps not. So maybe that won't be one that will be happening in the future. Maybe out of town retail will become more leisure facilities, and they'll be nearer to people's communities. And that's a possible perspective on it. The driver, as usual, will be demand. I think it just sort of depends on what people want and where they want it, which again connects back into the community aspect that we're talking about. If we are going to have that 15-minute community, then that's what will drive it, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know what other people on the call or people listening think, but I'd certainly be a big fan of improving that community feel and increasing that kind of engagement. Martin, finally, and just before we do a one-word answer question at the end, what trends are you seeing? Are you seeing things changing in terms of what people want to be, what people want building, what developers are interested in at all?
I think I would echo what Simon has just said. I think I'm from obviously a slightly different perspective, seeing the need for this, I don't know whether you call it cross cross-fertilization or something. It's, you know, there's examples in my world at the moment of, for instance, an interior designer pitching for work at a school because, you know, the school are seeing the need to create office space and classroom environments that the children can expect to see when they graduate. So you get, you know, people that haven't got core skills in education developing buildings that come from a different sector. Similarly, the need for what we're doing here, you know, working from home in the residential market. So I think there are people working out how to create workspaces at home that aren't just perched on the kitchen table, but you have a private space because you need to be, you know, it needs to be private. You don't want interruptions on these sorts of calls. So that raises challenges. And I think the whole local thing, I noticed last night on TV, Google have this local advert running, don't they, with Anthony Joshua saying, you know, it's my hood. And then he advertises half a dozen different company or retail organizations. And that must be fantastic for that, wherever that is. I'm not sure where it is. It's North London somewhere. But, you know, that whole idea of going local and working with people who are local, I think is really a big opportunity. But how you deliver it, I'm not entirely convinced, because landowners aren't necessarily local. You know, London particularly is owned by thousands of people, literally thousands of people who don't live here. So making them feel local, I think, is quite a big challenge.
Interesting. Yeah. Right. Final single word answers. What are the sectors to follow in future? Where do we think the growth areas are going to be? Where should we be investing our time and money? Let's start with Martin. Yeah, since you were last.
Okay. Well, I mean, I've got probably quite a blunt answer to that. I still think the office is a very key part of our communities and will continue to be. So I think we will return to offices. So at the moment, I'm seeing a rise in the office expectations. The difficulty is, what is it? You know, how do you change what it is and where do you put it and those sorts of things? And so it's not easy, but I think I continue to believe that the office market will predominate, particularly in London and the South East. A lot of the work opportunities coming forward.
Right. Yeah, it is interesting that as well, because I think a lot of people over the last few months said, well, offices are never going to be needed again. We're not going to be using offices anymore. Now we can all sit at home and do our jobs perfectly well from home. But yeah, I tend to agree with you. I'm quite keen to get back to an office, to be fair. But Simon, any thoughts from you?
Logistics. You said one word, so that was my one word.
One word answer than Martin's, yeah. As in sheds. Can we say the word sheds?
I know the architect in the room doesn't like us talking about sheds, but yeah, I think obviously warehousing has become crucial at the moment with everyone taking deliveries and so on. I think that will continue as people have got used to having stuff delivered rather than going to shops. So yeah, logistics.
And finally, Cristina, do you see yourself designing sheds from now on?
I design anything, really. Literally, since we set up our own company, we are not specialized. We work with our clients to do what our clients need, and I think this is really important. So from my point of view, I think this will be one of the things, so more bespoke work as an industry to kind of adapt. I think it's going to be really important to adapt. And in terms of what sector I think we should all be looking to invest on, and this is to do with sustainability, I think we should be considering retrofitting, and we should be considering how we can make the most of the structures we currently have to adapt them to the needs that we will have, post-COVID.
Brilliant, thank you. Okay, we don't have any questions at the moment. I don't know if anybody on the call wants to ask any questions, and if not, then we'll wrap things up. Thank you all very much indeed for your contributions this morning. Really appreciate it. What we will be doing, of course, is putting this recording online so that people can watch it on YouTube afterwards. And if anybody does want to get in touch with any of the speakers, just let us know or get in touch with them directly. I'm sure they'll answer any questions that you have separately. But for now, in the absence of any questions coming through on the Q&A or the chat, just finally to say thank you again to you all for joining us this morning, and hopefully catch up with you soon, either virtually or in real life. Cheers. Thank you.
Thank you.